Hi, everyone. We have Christine Louis de Canonville back. We did an overview of her book, The Ghost in the Machine, Unmasking the Hidden Psychology of Narcissistic Abuse. It's such a good book. I mentioned this on the last session that we had with Christine, where she actually took each chapter and gave an overview. While I'm pulling that up, I want Christine, can you just remind the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Uh, Hello, everybody. Just to let you know, I'm a psychotherapist and I live in Ireland. And for 33 years, I worked in the whole area of trauma. And I was specializing in narcissistic abuse for, I don't know, 20 years, maybe, certainly 15 years anyway. So I'm bringing you a little bit of information about the difference between narcissistic abuse and regular domestic abuse.
Right, it's so funny to put it in that way, but when we talk about the difference between the two, you'll get it. We
Yes.
promise you'll get it. Let me just read a very short paragraph about chapter two that sets the tone for what we're going to delve into. Chapter two, decoding the dilemma and taking control, navigating should I stay or should I go in narcissistic relationships, focuses on the challenging decision many victims face when involved with a narcissist. It examines the emotional turmoil that arises from the cycle of idealization, devaluation, and rejection typical in these relationships. Victims often grapple with the confusion and self doubt, struggling to distinguish between genuine affection and manipulation. The chapter emphasizes the importance of setting boundaries, seeking support, and practicing self-care to regain control over one's life. And that can take a long time. By understanding these dynamics, readers are empowered to make informed decisions about their relationships, ultimately fostering healing and autonomy. It's
Yeah.
such a journey. It's such a journey. Can we take a deep dive into chapter two?
Yes, let's. So I have a few notes which I will use, and I just want to be sure that I don't forget anything important. So the first thing is, what are the differences between regular domestic violence and narcissistic abuse? Because there is a difference. So although regular general domestic violence does incorporate psychological abuse and physical abuse, there are actually traits that a narcissist will bring in that generally a partner wouldn't bring in that make it so much worse. And these tactics are especially designed to create a deep bond in the victim, and that causes dependency on the abuser. So it's quite specific. So the kind of tactics that you will get in narcissistic abuse is gaslighting. Gaslighting is how they toy with your sense of reality, where they will make you doubt your own self. It's it's covert aggression. Um, it's not physical, it's mental. So they will often this is the one thing that you'll hear victims of narcissistic abuse saying, that they're just confused. They can't figure out what's happening. They don't know how they got to the place that they're in. And that is the confusion that's caused by gaslighting, toying with their sense of reality, like saying things to them, and then later denying that they ever said that. I never said that. Where did you get that from? You're crazy. You're imagining things that when you hear that enough, that can actually play on your psyche. And you get that you can't trust yourself. You can't trust you actually can't trust your own memory when that happens, because you think you remember something happening in a particular way, but you're being told, no, that never happened. And narcissists will even involve other people. something might happen in a group, and then the other group member will say, no, no, I don't remember it like that. No, that didn't happen. So these are the flying monkeys that narcissists will use. Now, often the flying monkeys don't know that they're flying monkeys, but they add to the confusion for the victim. So emotional manipulation. Manipulation is a huge one with narcissists. They'll manipulate a situation they manipulate in every situation to get their own way. Intermittent reinforcement. I go into that in depth. There's a whole chapter on that in the book. It's an important one. It's when the narcissist is nice to you at times, but then they suddenly switch and they become cruel, very cruel. So that confuses you. You're going from, this switch and bait system has you, again, you love them, but you don't understand why they're doing what they're doing. So you don't know where you are, and you never know when it's going to change. You could be laughing with a narcissist at the table, having a good old time, really enjoying each other. And suddenly they'll turn. And they might say, why do you always do that? And what? What did I do? You know what you did. You know. You always spoil things. And they get up and they'll run their fingers through their hair in a very aggressive manner. That's ambient abuse, by the way. Ambient abuse is not physical, it's psychological, but they instill fear in you by their actions. So the running of their fingers through their hair in a very aggressive way tells you they're really angry, they're really annoyed, or suddenly thumping the table when you've just been laughing. So it puts the fear of God in you. So that's ambient abuse. And they like to have people fearful of them. You'll see that in leaders a lot of the time, how they get even more powerful when they think that people fear them. But you can have that on a smaller scale in your own home. It's still equally as powerful for the narcissist. Their lack of empathy. They won't put themselves, they can't put themselves in your shoes to know how you're feeling, how they're making you feel. So appealing to them is not going to work. So they won't put their self in your shoes. Coercive control. They control everything. And that tends to get worse over time. So they might start tracking you. I've had several clients who had trackers on their phones. And I get them to go and, will you please go and check? I'm also afraid that when people come to me that I'm not very well up on surveillance equipment, that could there be surveillance equipment that they could hear our conversation? And so I always ask them, please, will you go to your phone shop and get it checked to see if there's any surveillance on it? And several times there has been.
Wow.
So they know where you go. They can track you, your movements. They might check the car for mileage, see where, how far did you drive that day? All sorts of things. They might comment on your clothing. You're not, look at the state of you. You're not going out in that, are you? Hey, what's wrong with it? And so confidence has been eroded constantly in small ways and big ways. So all of these tactics wear down the person's self-esteem, and they make them they become more and more entrapped in the relationship. Can you see how that would work?
Yes, I'm thinking of someone that I'd interviewed a couple of times who took an hour-long interview and edited out every single thing that I said and only kept their parts of the interview.
Oh gosh,
And
yeah.
when I said, that's not okay, we didn't discuss that ahead of time. It was, well, you're just boring, you're just this, and all that could have been true, but it was interesting that I didn't buy it. I was starting to catch who they are, this expert on narcissistic abuse. I was starting to catch on that, oh, they're an expert because that's what they are
Yeah.
themselves. And I noticed I started getting, I bring this up because in our world of social media and online trolling, I started getting trolled by people I'd never heard of by these bogus accounts related to exactly what this person was trying to gaslight me about during a show. And I thought, well, this is interesting. This is interesting. And they were trying to instill fear and they were trying to just keep knocking me down a few pegs so that I would be afraid of them and I would keep their shows on the air. I found out later many people had removed their shows after they
Oh,
interviewed this
okay.
person. They felt so uncomfortable they didn't release their shows. And so that was what they used to try and use people to keep showing these episodes to keep getting entrenched in the victim community to gather
Yeah.
more people to them so that they could abuse victims of narcissistic abuse by saying that they are the leader of this movement. And some of the people kept those videos up and some of them took them down. But I thought after I had talked to you about this years ago, I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's that control you're talking about. They want to control the narrative of everything.
Yeah. And control you.
Yes.
And it also tips something else. I can see the transactional. Uh, Narcissists are always transactional. And what does that mean? It means that what's in this for me? And if they're showing an interest in you in any way, and I'm not talking about even being in a relationship with them, if they're showing any interest in you at all, they're after something. There's a transaction going on. And here he got a platform and he cut you out of your own platform to a large degree.
Hilarious. I was like, wow, yeah, I think my voice wasn't even involved, which that didn't hurt my ego. It just made me think, what on earth? Who does that? Who does that? Well, we know
Yeah.
who does that.
And you could easily have got lost in that relationship, very easily, because I bet he was charming
Hmm.
and I bet that he was interesting,
And a flatterer.
a flatterer. They're often very charming and they're often quite good looking.
Sometimes,
Um,
not in this instance, but sometimes, yes.
well, there can be something very attractive about
Yes.
their manner. If it's not necessarily the looks, there's something attractive. There's almost like a childlike quality in them. And that's the part that appeals to me. I love their childlike qualities. I warm to that very quickly. I am aware of that. Um, and in a way, they kind of bring out my playfulness because I'm a bit serious. I'm a serious kind of person. I'm not inwardly, but outwardly, I look serious. So they bring out my child in me as well, which can be good for me. So I'm aware of that. But if they're showing an interest in you in any way, they're after something, that's for sure. And you might think, oh, so what have I got that they'd want? Sure, why would they be interested in me? But that's your humility. There is something, they're after something. Otherwise, they wouldn't waste their time with you.
And sometimes they love to tell you. That's the ones I particularly find funny now, which I don't run into them very often anymore. I probably emit a smell. Oh, she's not going to fall for it at this point,
Yeah,
all the years. I
yeah,
mean, not that they won't still, anytime I've gotten arrogant about that, one of them shows up. So I am not getting arrogant about it, but they do like to pre-prepare you, some of them, by telling you how important they are and how lucky you are that they're in your presence.
yes,
It's
yes,
quite amazing. And I think we confuse that with confidence. And we've been
yes.
propagandized
Mm,
over many, many years to
mm,
equate that with power.
mm. But if you actually, when you're learning this subject, and I cover this in another chapter, you look at the 9 criteria that makes up the personality. Because the way you will know, the the purpose of my book is to answer the question, am I with a narcissist? And should I leave or can I stay? They're the questions I want to answer in my book, the two
Mm.
questions. And um, the 9 criteria is for diagnosing a narcissist, but you don't have to have all 9. The person doesn't have to have the 9 traits. They only have to have 5 of the traits to be diagnosed. So one of them would be grandiosity, you know, how clever they are, how great they are, how they are the best in their field. And they want to be seen that way, of course. Um, their need for attention, constant need for, they have to be the center of attention. You were probably taking too much attention from, too much time away from him, and he wasn't getting as much attention as he wanted. And that was what that was. But within that 9, there's haughty behavior. That's what you're talking about. It's not confidence, it's arrogance, it's haughty, arrogant behavior. And that's quite different from confidence. It's different. So as you learn about these things, you've now learned, whether you realize it or not, you pick up on that haughty behavior, and you don't buy into it, you don't play into it. And they've sensed that. They know. They're not stupid. They know what works and what doesn't work. And that's why having good boundaries works.
I think it's fascinating that one of the things that you and I talked about over the years was just how um, the reason why they're so good at what they do is because they are not burdened with empathy. So
Yeah.
imagine it. I used to imagine it this way. Okay, so imagine I could only see in black and white. That's
Mm.
all I could do is see in black and white. I would become an expert at seeing things and noticing the nuance in black and white because I can't see in color.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
I feel like that's what,
Yeah. That's a good analogy. Yes.
and so they become great at the
Mm.
manipulation of that because that's all they can
Mm.
do when you're not burdened with.
Yeah. And we can take that a step further because narcissism is a spectrum disorder. The higher they are on the spectrum, they actually, the highest part would be a psychopath. They don't have conscience. Not only do they not have empathy, they actually don't have a conscience. Where there might be times where you and I'd really love to give you a dig. I'd really love to give you a slap, but we wouldn't because we wouldn't want to hurt someone. But if you've no conscience, you can slap away, it doesn't matter. You're not going to feel bad. So no empathy and then no conscience. And a lot of people will be living with psychopaths. A lot of your listeners tuning in will be with psychopaths, even though they don't realize it, because they're imagining that's a serial killer
Right.
and that they look like thugs. No, no.
As
Psychopaths are around us in the workplace all the time.
I think we've been anesthetized to psychopathy in
Yeah,
so many ways, which is why your books are so good at taking a pin and going psst, out of that. Look at what you're really dealing with here.
yeah, yeah.
Let's talk about how one can start. It's very difficult when you're in this relationship where someone is constantly throwing down those firecrackers that when they land on the ground, they pop. And because it's so much fun to watch you skip
Mm,
and jump and try to get away from whatever it is they're doing, because you
yeah.
just want to go back to when they were love bombing you, because that felt fantastic.
Oh, yeah, yeah. That's a great time for both of them. Yeah, yeah.
So, how do we start to um, pull that what's happening out here into here so that we can deal with it from a place of power?
the first thing we have to know is how they behave. It's very hard to make any decisions if you don't know what's happening. And of course, hopefully the answers are all in this book. Um, and if all of the answers aren't in the book, at least you'll get terms that you'll be able to do further research on. But it's knowing why it's so hard. Why is it so hard to leave them? You know, relationships break up all the time. Couples break up all of the time and get divorced all of the time. But they can remain friends. They can co-parent together. Um, some of them even manage to stay friends. They might remarry and they still remain friends with each other. That happens a lot. But that rarely happens with a narcissist. It ends up awful. Getting away from them is so hard and so expensive that so why is that? You know, why can some couples break up and be okay? Or even decide never to see each other again, but they move on with their lives. It's very hard to move on with your life when you're with a narcissist.
And
Very
even
hard.
you can break up with someone who behaved very narcissistically at different times in the relationship.
Yeah.
And you can know that about them and maybe even stay in a relationship with them, either in the relationship as a couple or that they're on the periphery of your life. You don't have to go no contact.
Mm.
So why is that concept of having to just not have any interaction with them at all? Why is that such an important part of your healing when you're in that relationship with someone who's extremely narcissistic?
Um, there's many ways of doing no contact. It's not all or nothing. It doesn't have to be. But you can limit your contact with them, even when you're living with them and you're trying to get ready to separate. Um, no contact can be that you make yourself less interesting. You react less to um, their outbursts. You give them less. Because now what you're doing is you're stop giving them reward. When they see you upset, that's rewarding for them. That makes them worse. So no contact might mean that actually I leave the home and I'll try to deal with them, or it might not even, it might be a friend. It doesn't even have to be your partner. That you won't see it, you won't see your friend for a while. And the reason being, when you don't do contact or you limit your contact down and you're not reacting as much, it gives you a chance to settle down, calm down your brain, that you can see things clearer. Because when you're high and anxious, which you will be in these relationships, you can't figure it out. You're too close to it. You can't see it. You're on high alert all of the time. Your own body is flooding you with chemicals.
And you're also being isolated typically by your friends, your family, and so on. So that person is the
Yeah,
only other human, and they've set you up to get all of your thinking, all of your
yeah,
behavior, everything is controlled by
yeah,
this one person. And so it's very when you get that space away, that's why they don't want you to get away, because then you start hearing from friends and family, that's really not healthy relationships. And you start to see, and you're away enough to really take stock in it and go, yeah, this isn't
and
healthy.
it can be very difficult for your family who love you when they see. They might not know the depth of it, but they can sense this is not right. He's not nice to her. He doesn't speak right well to her. When I go over to visit, he makes me feel very uncomfortable. He's trying to get rid of me out of there. I know he is. They know they don't have the words for it, perhaps, but they can feel that this person is isolating their loved one, that they're driving their family away from them. Now, the family might say, leave him. Oh, now I'm talking about leave him, but this could equally be a female partner.
Right.
So I'll stay with the male and female through this, but please be aware, it might be the man that's the victim in the relationship. The woman could be the narcissist, and he will go through exactly the same things. There'll be a few slight variations, but by and large, it's the same behavior. But what happens then is the parent, the family member will say to their loved one, leave him, get out of there, come home to us. And the partner won't. They're too afraid. They're afraid, oh, I can't. He'll come looking for us. He'll kill me if I do. Now, they might not mean that literally, but that's what they're feeling. And eventually the family get fed up. And they all say, well, if you want to choose that life, you say, well, I'll leave you to it. And very often the family pull away for their own safety. And that, of course, is playing into the narcissist, because now the victim is really isolated. And that's going to make them become even more dependent on their abuser with time, with the trauma bonding.
Sometimes it wakes them up to when they've got only that person 24/7. Sometimes I think it's following that edict of, okay, this is what you say you want, so you're going to get it full on, and then we'll check back in a bit and we'll see how you're faring, and maybe now you'll be ready to go. Like they,
Yeah,
without any context coming from sources other than the abuser, sometimes that can shift people into, oh my gosh, this is horrible. However, there's such a danger in that too, because of who they're being left
yeah,
with. And it depends on the how far down the rabbit hole this particular abuser is on that
yeah.
spectrum.
I became very interested in knowing what makes it so hard to leave them. And, so I carefully listened and watched what my clients were telling me. And I've noticed that I can name 4 things that I know that make it harder for any victim to get out of the relationship. So maybe will I go over those?
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, well, not necessarily in any order, but the first one, let's say cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when we hold 2 conflicting beliefs at the same time. If I put it in a simple term, like, will I wear the red dress or the blue dress? Which one makes my bum look smaller? Okay, we know that one. And we go from, and we go back and forward. When we eventually I'm going with the blue one. Now our life gets a bit easier. We've made a decision. But that's the cognitive dissonance. Oh, 2 beliefs. Well, I like the red one because my color is red. But the shape of that dress does make my bum look big. The blue one, I don't like the blue one so much, but it does make my bum look smaller. So, and we go through that process in our relationships. So he loves me not.
And we're trained to think that that's a healthy, I mean, think about every Disney movie about a Disney princess or all the teen movies and books and so
Yes,
on. That we were set up to think. That's what makes it hard too, I think. We're set up with all this propaganda to think that that's actually how a healthy relationship starts.
yeah. And of course, we have been through the idealization period that's the very beginning of the relationship, when the relationship, it really is wonderful. It's the best ever for both of them. Um, and the victim always wants to get back to that. I want to get back to what we had. What happened? When did it change? Or how did it change? They don't know, but they remember, when things were good, he was the best. He was the most loving. And they hold on to that. So the cognitive dissonance makes it very, very difficult. He loves me not, toing and froing. Where when you start doing therapy, you sit down and you start, well, let's look at it. Let's look at how much he loves you. And yes, okay, they're real signs. And let's look at how you don't feel loved. And let's see. And let's see today, where is the relationship today as to where it was in the beginning? So you start to unravel everything with the client so that they're coming to the realizations. I mean, it'd be easy for me. In one session, I could say, yeah, definitely you're with a narcissist, get out. But it doesn't happen that way. People have to make their own decisions. There's too much depends on the decision. You know, it's a big decision. Do I leave or do I stay? Nobody wants to leave their marriage. They don't want to have to uproot their home and their children. How are they going to live? Financially, the children, there isn't going to be the same standard of living for a while for the children. Nobody wants to do that to their children. So there's many, many reasons why they want to stay. So to make that decision is not an easy one, and it never is. So that's why I think it's really important that the victim has to make that decision for themselves. It's important. There's something else called the sunk cost fallacy.
Say that again.
The sunk cost fallacy.
Now, that's a new one on me. What the heck is
Okay.
that?
Well, basically, you'll know this one. You actually will know it. It's just a fancy title. This is when we invest time and effort into anything. So they could, let's say they're 10 years in this marriage. They have children in this marriage. So they've invested a lot of time. They've gone through a lot of pain to hold the marriage together, to build their home together. So they've invested a great deal into it. And that investment is the very thing that's holding them. It's a bit like, for instance, if you buy a ticket for, I haven't been to the cinema for a long time, so I don't know how much the cinema ticket is anymore. But let's say a cinema ticket is $10. I don't know what it is. But how much is it anyway? Do you know?
Yeah, anywhere from $10 to $20.
Okay. So let's say you've bought a ticket for the cinema at $15, okay? And you go off to the cinema, and after a half an hour, you think, oh my God, this is a lot of rubbish. The chances are you're going to sit through the whole 2 hours of that movie because you spent $15.
Mm.
Rather than saying, oh, for God's sake, I'd rather go and I'll pop in and see a friend on the way home and spend my time with them. That'll be much more to my advantage. But because we've invested, we kind of have this thing, we have to stick with it. Another one that I've come across in the therapy room, I've come across this one a couple of times, a few times, where there were several years in the marriage, but they haven't any children. They had agreed that they were going to buy the house first, that they were going to start their, maybe they both had businesses or whatever, or work, career-mindedness. And the woman now is getting to a time, she's in her 30s, and she wants to start a family. I've had this a few times now. And they don't want to leave now because they're afraid if they leave, sure, how long is it going to take me to find the right person? Sure, I'll probably have to invest at least 2 years to make sure that they're the right person before I decide to have a baby with them. And how long is it going to take me to find that person? And by that time, if that's going to take me 3 or 4 years, maybe it'll be too late. Maybe my body clock is running out. Maybe I won't be able to have children. And they often stay for that reason, to see can they get pregnant.
I think too, the narcissist is also weighing their cost. That's what I loved about reading this. You describe it from the viewpoint of the victim, which
Mhm.
usually that's described, or what we've talked about in the past is that's described from the point of view of the narcissist who is so angry that they've put all this effort into
Yes.
this relationship and you're gonna bail
Yeah.
because you owe them because they deigned to give you their time. So I think it's so important to see it from both
From both
perspectives.
sides. Yeah,
So
that is a good point. And I mean, in the therapy room, I would look and see what keeps them. I mean, if you're so awful and they treat you so badly, why are they wasting their time with you? And I would look at that. And of course, they have put in quite an investment. Sometimes they have already had other relationships that have gone pear-shaped on them as well. And, it takes them quite a while to get the victim to fall into their way. They've invested several years um, getting the power and control, making the person frightened of them, gaslighting them. That all took time. And now they have them the way they want them. And they are valuable to them because for a start, the victim gives them a sense of normality. They have a family, they have children, they have a lovely home. The wife, she's a good woman, she's a good mother, she's a good wife. She keeps the home beautiful. And he's proud of that. He doesn't want to lose that. He's not, maybe he doesn't tell her these things, but he doesn't want to lose that. It gives him a sense of normality in the outside world as well, that he's not a man on his own. You know, he is a man who's wanted and needed. And he can say what a good husband he is and what a good father he is and how he lives on the lovely house on the top of the hill.
right,
So
the veneer.
there's a payoff for both of them for staying in the relationship. And then I have to look then and, well, what is the cost of that? That's what you're getting, but what is it costing you?
I know I literally just ran across a photo through social media, which I never go on, but I went on to check company stuff and I ran across a picture. It came up in my, you should follow this person. And that happens sometimes with people that have been on the other side of this, that have been on the victim side of this. And then you see that person and you're triggered all over again. That doesn't happen anymore, thank goodness. But I
Yeah,
saw it and I saw the spouse in the picture and I
yeah,
just felt so profoundly sad because that same plastic forced smile on the spouse of this man who just goes through life ravaging as many women and men as he
yeah,
possibly can. And I just, that was my reaction now was,
yeah,
oh, she looks so unhappy,
mm,
so profoundly unhappy. It's obvious.
yeah,
Um, seeing that years later, the cost to someone who is deciding to stay in because of
yeah.
the kids and so on. And I'm not judging that because
No, and,
everybody's
and the cost is you lose yourself. That's the cost. You actually, most of us know that narcissists do not live out of a true self. They live out of a false self. What they want you to see, what they want to portray, is not the real person. The partner living with them knows who the real person is. But the victim also loses their true self because they get into the defending themselves. They get into being compliant because it's easier. I'm not going to fight over every day. I'm not going to fight over something. So I'll swallow it. I'll repress what I have to say because it's not worth it. I might end up being punched on the ground. Many
no,
a time, many would end up
I
that way.
I had someone say to me who ran into this woman say to me a couple of years ago, when I used to hug her, I still felt this enormous warmth. She just is warm when you hug her. She's married to a very abusive person, psychologically abusive. And they said to me a couple years ago, this same person that I just saw a picture of, they said I gave her a hug and it was like I was hugging ice. All that warmth is gone.
Yeah, yeah,
But, you know, 25 years in that kind of a relationship.
yes. And I must mention as well that not all narcissistic relationships are physical, by the way. They
Right.
are all psychological abuse, all of them. They're not all physical. So if your partner is not hitting you, you might think, well, he isn't a narcissist. And that's not true. They're not all physically abusive. So that's important to know. Okay, the third thing is it's something called the confirmation bias. So that's basically when the victim seeks to look for the beliefs that everything is okay. Like they'll say to themselves, but but the kids love him. He's such a good dad. And maybe in many ways he is a good dad. Maybe he's a very good provider. Um, he may not be particularly warm to the children, but he still would be considered to be a good dad. Um, they'll say, well, maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe it's not that bad. Maybe I'm oversensitive. Maybe it's true. He always says I'm too sensitive. Maybe I am being oversensitive. Maybe I'm blowing this out of proportion. I've heard all of those things I've said to you. I've heard in the therapy room, all of them. Anything that's in my books has come from real situations. I don't make them up. They're what I have experienced in the therapy room coming direct from the victims. So that confirmation, basically, we're trying to convince ourselves you don't have to leave because they don't want to leave. Who wants to leave their home and their marriage? And the sense of failure that so many feel from that. Nobody wants that. And so they convince themselves reasons to stay.
Do you think
But that
that's
makes sense.
it does? Do you think that in some people in that situation also there's a level of fear because they've seen this person unmasked and so they know what they're in a way they know what they're in for if they do leave?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Um, yeah. And that's where we come into the fourth, that leads in nicely into the fourth one, which is self-gaslighting.
Mm.
So as I mentioned gaslighting, how the abuser can toy with your sense of reality. We can do that to ourselves. All of us, every one of us can do that. So we can convince ourselves it's not as bad as all that. I know people who have a worse time. Um, so what they do is they try to minimalize everything. So they're toying with their own reality. Their own reality knows it is bad. Their own reality knows he's psychologically abusing me every day, all the time. In some cases, he's physically abusing me. But they will minimalize it. They will make less of it. And they will even say, maybe I deserved it because I should have known better. I shouldn't have said that. I made him do it. So these four things, the cognitive dissonance, the sunk cost fallacy, the confirmation bias, and the self gaslighting, all help to keep you stuck in the relationship.
Self-gaslighting. Oof. Yeah, that's a big one. And that'll keep you. I've personally felt like this, and just in the number of people I've interviewed in these relationships after they leave, that all of these things linger and they get worked out through therapy. Hopefully, people are going to therapy. But I feel like people get stuck in that last piece. They carry that seems like it's the longest one to let go of. The you don't maybe you don't have that person in your life anymore telling you that the sky is actually brown and not blue, but they're telling you what your reality is and they're not in your life anymore. But now you've taken on their had the way that they treated you, and you're doing that to yourself. You're gaslighting yourself, and that can go on for years and years and keep you in that victim mentality. That's what I noticed about myself.
And also, I see these behaviors are really in a way of trying to stay safe.
Mm,
They might well know that their abuser could become very, very dangerous if they leave. They might, fear that. They might be consumed by fear. So they try to make that all manageable by explaining it all away to themselves and that they don't have to leave. And yet, somewhere in them, they know that this isn't right. But what they really want is a magic button. They want a wand to make it all right so that they can have the person that they first met back again and live happily ever after in their home with their children and that partner. And that's all they want. That's what they want. That's normal. That's what we all want. We want to be happy. We want to be loved.
very true. Very true. Christine, what would you say to someone that, they're out of the relationship, but they are staying stuck in the self-recrimination so that that person still plays an active role in how the victim lives their lives, even though that person is no longer a part of their daily life. How we keep that
Yeah,
going.
yeah. I would see that. Yes, I would see a lot of that. I I would worked with people who had got out of the relationship. Unfortunately, a lot of them can't end the relationship because they have children. And most of these narcissists will um, insist on being, I mean, of course, they should be in their children's lives anyway. Of course, they should be. But they will use the children. It's not that they necessarily want the children in their lives, but they want to still control
Right.
their partner. And that can go on for life. It can go on well. It can go on with the kids have even left school, left college, and still they can still have that partner can have be controlled by the ex. What I find that they need is there's a lack of understanding what has happened in the relationship. There's pieces of the puzzle missing for them. They haven't made sense of it all. And that's why I think if you can understand what has actually been happening and that it's been happening deliberately to make you dependent on them, because actually narcissists are very dependent on their victims.
Right.
That's
You are
the
the one with
reality.
the power. That's what's
Yes,
so interesting. We're
yes,
with the power.
yes, but you don't know that and you don't feel that. But they need you in their life to feel powerful, whether it's to torment you or whether it's to enjoy your company. And they could do both.
And enjoying your company could mean that you are a mouse in a bathtub and they are a cat, batting you
Absolutely.
around, leaving you
Yeah,
alone,
yeah,
sometimes licking you and being very sweet and purring, and
yeah,
then and you're in
yeah,
that bathtub and you can't get out.
yeah. And sometimes it doesn't even take a word or an action. It can be a look. A look is enough
Yeah.
to melt, to bring that person right back, regress right back to that time when they were in the relationship, when they were full of fear. Now, they might be getting on with their life. They might have, be working and in a career again and look like that they're getting on, but that person can still cause them to regress by a look
Yes.
back to feeling totally out of control, fearful, afraid, upset, going home with them on their mind all over again. They only meet them on Christmas. That's the only time they meet them. And they'll spend the next almost the next 12 months trying to get to understand what the hell happened on that Christmas day. What happened? I haven't been able to get him out of my mind since then. And that's the power that they can have over their victims. But I find when people are being held like that, it's just that they don't have all the pieces of the puzzle. They don't understand what happened to them. And I hope that my book, I've gone into all sorts of areas in the book to try to and give them loads of examples and different examples that you can see it from different angles. So that you can then sit with yourself and say, does that happen? Well, it doesn't quite happen like Christine, that example, but actually, yeah, yeah, now I see it.
And I think
Oh my God.
you and I really experienced that. We were podcasting about this before podcasting was popular. It was still being made fun of. Podcasting, that's not going to go anywhere. How ridiculous. But we were talking about these things then.
Mhm.
I found, and we talked about this, is a lot of people would just listen to what we were saying to even go to sleep in a headphone. Like maybe they were laying next to the person that was abusing them, but they just needed to go to sleep and hear what we were saying, because it helped pull them out of that cognitive dissonance and put them in a
Yeah,
different kind, but one that would lead them towards healing,
yeah,
hopefully.
yeah,
I thought that that was interesting. It's just you're being
yeah,
brainwashed, and so you've got to take over that. And
yeah,
sometimes that involves what you're watching, what you're listening to, friends that you're around, and so on. And so I found that that medium of being able to
yeah.
just hear it privately was so important.
And for me in the therapy room, I'd get that moment when suddenly, we'd be working on something for months. And I knew they weren't quite getting, but that was okay. That's fine. We go at their pace. And then suddenly the penny drops.
Mm.
And that moment, it's magical. Like you'll see them suddenly, their body will lift up. You mean to say when he was doing the, oh my God. Yeah, now I get it. Now I see it. And I do something when I write that some people find irritating about my writing, I think. I'd imagine they might. I repeat things over and over in my book.
Perfect.
I do that deliberately. It's not that I've run out of words. We have to hear something at least 7 times before we start to take it in. It's the way our brains work. So I will repeat, I might dress it up slightly different, but I'll say it again. And you might say, oh, she's already said that somewhere else. But I'm trying to get it in. And it's interesting you say that people have gone to sleep with their earphones on, playing stuff. But that's what I'm doing
Yes,
in
exactly.
repeating it through my
Because
book.
we know that
Yeah,
whatever way, through
yeah,
audio, through the written word, through
yeah,
watching it on something, yeah, you've got to get
yeah,
those messages in. That's why, and this is for you viewers, we're really doing this, well, for anyone that want to listen, but also to honor the people that have been getting all of this. Well, I'm going to say brilliance, but Christine will rush to her Irish. Don't say nice things about me. But I'm going to say Christine's brilliance in delivering these messages. That's why we're going to take different chapters of this book, The Ghost in the Machine, to analyze them and bring them out to a wider scope. You can read these things in the book, and then you have the ability to listen to these chapters in detail here as well. So we'll be doing more of
yes.
these as we go on.
Mhm. And I take it we're coming to the end now. Um, I would say that in that particular chapter as well, um, when I work with people, I let them find out for themselves. I let them come to what they need to do. But there's one exception to that I feel that I'd like to mention now,
Yes.
and that is if you have experienced your partner trying to strangle you. It might only have happened once. This is a real bad red flag. This is the time that I am thinking, even if I'm not saying it, you need to get out. You need to get out, and you need to get out now. And the reason why I say that is strangulation. This is when somebody gets you choked, puts their arms around you, or they might get you in an arm lock and they're cutting off your breath that you can't breathe. You can be damaged very, very quickly in that behavior. And I'm not saying that your partner is meaning to harm you that much. They're in a red rage at that moment. They don't realize the pressure that they're putting on your throat. They don't realize. But you can lose consciousness in about 7 seconds. You can actually die within 60 seconds of strangulation. And this is why I'm saying this really, if it's happened in your relationship, you really need to start taking action.
And a lot of times that's introduced through sex. And it's
Yes,
told to you, oh, this will make a more erotic
yes,
experience.
yeah.
It'll be amazing. Guess what?
Mhm.
It's not
Well,
amazing.
it's taken seriously in Ireland. You know, we've got a few laws put into legislation that you
We don't
haven't
have
as
yet.
yet. We have a law against coercive control, and we are getting convictions. And the question was, it's going to be very, very hard to how you're going to prove that. But we've had quite a few convictions now on coercive control and non-fatal strangulation. We have legislation for, and the reason being is we know from research, from domestic violence organizations and the feedback we get there that that behavior escalates. It gets worse. So it might happen out of the blue once, but it has a tendency to escalate. And you're 700 times more likely to die in that relationship where there is non-strangulation, where it doesn't happen. That's why I'm saying if it's happening in your relationship, you really do need to go into therapy and talk to someone about it. You really need to start moving.
Right. This is serious.
It's very, very
No
serious
more.
because you could your life can go in a minute, literally 60 seconds. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to frighten you, but it is a time when you can't, oh, well, it wasn't that bad. You not only could you lose your life, you might not lose your life, but people get their voice boxes damaged. The voice can be changed. Your memory can be affected because the oxygen doesn't get to the brain. You could suffer memory problems, concentration problems. So there's all sorts of other things can happen to you in that kind of abuse.
And anyone that's trying to close your throat, your mechanism for saying what's happening.
Putting their hands over you, holding, that's all part of the same act, really. But I say more about it in my book, and there's examples and things like that.
Christine, can you name for our listeners the titles of your books?
Okay, I've written 4 books. Um, the 3 Faces of Evil, that's where I deal with the different levels. So the classical narcissist, the malignant narcissist, and the psychopath. And they can be in our lives, not necessarily married to them, but in the workplace, in our friendships. Um, then I wrote a book on shame, when shame begets shame,
Ooh, I
because,
went through a lot, and I know you did too,
oh
writing.
God, I did. It opened up a whole area in me that I wasn't expecting to. which I do mention in the book. So narcissists are very shameful. They're very shame prone. Um, they're trying to protect themselves. They've been victimized too as children. So they're very shame prone and they want to get rid of their shame. So they project it onto their victims. So you find yourself carrying lots of shame. The gaslighting syndrome, which is all about gaslighting in the workplace as well, all that sort of thing. And the ghost in the machine, which is about how the narcissist thinks and how they behave as a result of their thinking.
And
And
where
also the victim. It also looks at the victims. The ghost in the machine applied to the victim as well, how they think and how they behave as a result of their thinking.
to me
They're
it's
trying to
like
stay
a
safe.
it's
Yeah.
a culmination of all of your books, although each one of the books has its own information that you get into in depth. So I don't know. It just, I guess I have an interesting perspective as other readers and clients of yours because we started on that one and then we've gone through all of the books that you've written. This one
Yeah.
feels like, oh my gosh, okay. It's just structured in a way that
I specifically wrote it to address the two questions. Is my partner a narcissist and should I stay or go? And in order to be able to give that information, is it that you it's not about diagnosing
right.
your partner. It's about knowing the danger you're in and knowing what you can change and what you can't change. And sometimes you can change it if they're not too far up the spectrum. And there are questionnaires in the book that'll help you specifically for you to answer from your perspective, that'll give you an idea as to how bad the behavior really is. And can you work with it? Can you just go into therapy and work on it together, or is it beyond that?
Right, exactly. And I want to make sure everyone knows all of Christine's books are available to purchase only on her website, narcissisticbehavior.net. And we went into the whole reason why that is, which we don't need to go into again
No.
here, but that is where you can buy the books. I
Yes.
recommend all of them. So, Christine, we're going to do another one of these, but thank you so much for coming on and agreeing to even be on camera. Woo-hoo.
Yes, that's a big achievement. That's a big step forward for me as well. So you
Me
see, I'm growing. I'm still growing.
Exactly. It never stops. It never
Yeah,
stops until you're dead. So,
that's true.
well,
That's
actually,
true.
it keeps going from there too. But in terms,
And I'll end on saying, to anybody who's listening, there really is life after narcissistic abuse. I promise you. I've seen many miracles. And I'm a miracle of it as well, because I've come through that as well.
it,
So there is life. Please, it is a message of hope. It's not doom and gloom.
there is so something so I remember hearing people say, yeah, it's been 5 years or it's been 10 years or it's been 2 years, and I don't even think about that person anymore. So for
Yeah.
someone who knows what this kind of abuse is like, where
Mhm.
literally you're in a relationship with someone where every waking moment, they are in your mind. They are dominating your thoughts. If you
Oh,
go to
yes.
sleep and you
Mhm.
wake up in the middle of the night, the first thing you think is about that.
Yeah.
There is something about that that people just don't get unless they've been in this kind of a relationship. It's so to
Yeah.
hear someone
Mhm.
say, I've been in that. Yes, I lived that. It was horrible. And now, these years later,
Mhm.
I don't even think about them
Yeah.
anymore. Or even if I do,
Yes.
that is possible. That is possible. And that's what people need to hear too. It gives you
Yeah.
just enough, a smidge of hope.
Yes. And we know when people come in to me and they're saying they're out of the relationship, but they haven't been, they're not free of them. And I say, yeah, you find yourself thinking about them in the middle of the first thing in the morning, last thing at night. And when you get up to go to the loo in the middle of the night, that's the first thought. How do you know? That I know that they're not, or that's the cognitive dissonance. Their brain is trying to still, it has questions, it's still trying to look for answers. That's the cognitive dissonance at work. And when you get your answers, it doesn't take away all the memories. It doesn't do that. But it's sort of like you can land. It's like, okay, now I understand it. I can see my part in it too, and I can avoid doing that again. And but you need your answers.
Absolutely. That's why you get into a fever of needing
That's
to
why.
read everything.
Yeah.
Just know that that has an end point as well. And you should be thinking, not that I want to put shoulds on people, but it's healthy to think, okay, at some point I won't be
Mm.
needing all these
That's part
answers.
of the healing process. It
Yeah.
actually is a part of the healing process. And hopefully you'll get to a place where I'm at, where I actually now, and I'm not suggesting for one moment that people have to be there, but now I actually have compassion for my abusers. I still don't like their behavior, and I still am aware that how much it hurt me, but I have compassion because I know that they too were victims and they were acting out of their own abuse. But the difference between them and me is I dealt with mine. They didn't deal with theirs, and they will keep then moving from one person to the next, and they'll bring that abuse with them, and they'll keep repeating it.
And you, as the victim, your opportunity, and it's not unheard of with someone who's a narcissist, but it's much less of their story of what yours is as the victim. You have such an unbelievable opportunity to grow and to evolve
Absolutely.
and to have the most amazing life far beyond the even the dreamiest part of the love bombing.
Yeah.
You actually can have a life be even better than that love bombing stage that
Yes.
you had, but it's sustainable and it's your regular life.
Yeah.
You
And
move.
I tell you what else you'll get, which I don't think is spoken about as well. You'll see how amazing you are,
Yeah,
how resilient you actually were. Imagine, geez, it was hell. You were in hell, and you got out of that hellhole, and you've gone on to thrive, not only survive but thrive, and then you realize what an amazing capacity you have for resilience. And what an amazing person you really are. What amazing people we all have the potential to be.
yeah, and you
It
get to the
is
point.
wonderful.
You do get to the point where now I say someone who's behaving narcissistically instead of that person's a narcissist. I'm not saying either one of those is better than the other. It's just for me, I loved it when I got to that need to
There's
not
a
just
freedom. There's a
exactly
freedom there, and this is not about you have to have compassion or you have to forgive them. It's not, I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about freedom. There's a freedom on coming to that place where you can have compassion for them. You don't have to judge them. You don't have to do anything with them or for them. You
right.
can just let them go.
But in your
And if,
own
yeah,
mind, you're
you're
not
free.
paying rent anymore to that nasty behavior.
Yeah, they're not taking up valuable real estate in your head anymore.
You can think about them and go, yeah, that was bad. And then there's no charge. There's not even
Yeah,
anything that needs to dissipate. It
yeah,
can get to that place. Oh,
yeah.
okay. We'll
Okay.
have more of these. I'm so excited that you're doing them. Everybody, Christine Louis de Canonville, please go to narcissisticbehavior.net and we will have more of these. Christine,
Bye bye for now, everybody. Bye bye.
thank you, listeners, for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next show.